In this video, we'll be reviewing the second portion of our craniate lab, the tetrapods. Remember that the tetrapods have paired pectoral and pelvic girdles. They have an axial skeleton, which includes their cranium, vertebral column, and then arising out laterally from it is the appendicular skeleton. Make sure you look over the homology among those tetrapod forelimbs and hind limbs. Tetrapods have lungs for the exchange of gases, and recall that this required some alteration through the evolutionary process of our hearts. The hearts of tetrapods have 3 chambers or 4 chambers. The 3-chambered hearts found in amphibians and some reptiles include 2 atria and 1 ventricle. The 4-chambered heart of birds and mammals includes 2 atria and 2 ventricles. Remember that the 3 or 4-chambered heart is part of the dual circulatory system, where blood exits the heart twice on a complete route through the circulatory system, once headed to the body and then a second time headed to the lungs. The first group of tetrapods are the amphibians. The amphibians are characterized by having anamniotic eggs, which means they don't have a shell around them. They have a metamorphic life cycle, very familiarized by the frog, as when it hatches from the egg, it turns into a tadpole, then metamorphosizes into the adult frog. Amphibians have rudimentary, very simple lungs, and in order to ventilate these lungs, they use intercostal muscles between their ribs to help expand their chest. These simple lungs and a heart without an interventricular septum also require some cutaneous respiration, or respiration through the skin of the amphibian. The amphibians must be kept moist in order to do this gas exchange, so they have an epidermis that has lots of glands around it. The glands not only help keep their skin moist, but also produce a somewhat slimy or slippery texture at times. The skin of amphibians does not include any keratinized claws, nails on the digits, and they are ectothermic, relying on external structures and sources for their heat. The amphibians include frogs and toads, which are called anurans, and salamanders and newts, which are known as urodales. Here we see a newt, and we can tell that this is not a lizard because there are no scales on the skin. There are no claws or nails on each of the digits. Here we see 2 common anurans. These are Rio Grande leopard frogs, similar to the frogs that we dissected in lab. The amniotes, as a group, contain shelled eggs, and they have extryonic membranes that surround each of the embryos. They have keratinized epidermal structures such as scales, feathers, hair, claws, nails, hooves, etc. And their bony endoskeletons are more supportive and a little more complex than the amphibians. The groups of amniotes include reptiles, crocodiles, turtles, the squamates like snakes and lizards, and birds, and then finally mammals. If we look at the reptiles first, reptiles are characterized as having a 3-chambered heart with a partial interventricular septum splitting the ventricle into right and left sides. Reptiles have scales or feathers, and they must be shed periodically as the reptile grows. Reptiles have a unique type of teeth called homodont dentition, which is where all of the teeth are basically the same shape. Most reptiles are ectotherms, again requiring the environment to help them maintain and regulate their body temperature. Reptiles include crocodiles, turtles, which have a shell that's an expansion of their rib cage, composed of the carapace and the plastron, and then squamates, which are snakes and lizards. If we look at these images, we can see a turtle with its shell composed of the carapace and the plastron. Here we see a lizard, and we are reminded that this lizard is a little bit different than the salamander or newt that we saw just a moment ago because of the scales and the claws on the digits. And then here is a broad-banded water snake captured by yours truly. Birds represent basically a lineage of theropod dinosaurs. Their epidermal structures are feathers, and they're characterized by having this four-chambered heart. They operate as endotherms, using their own metabolic heat to maintain a relatively constant body temperature. As a weight reduction mechanism, they have hollow bones, and they've also reduced the number of bones by fusing them, such as in the pelvis or forelimb, and having a lack of caudal vertebra. These are all aimed at reducing weight for their volant or flying lifestyle. Birds have a keeled sternum, which offers an increased amount of surface area for the pectoral muscles to attach so that they can move their wings. Birds do not have any teeth. They utilize bill or beak adaptations for specific diets and feeding. They have probably the most efficient set of lungs in the animal world. These are known as parabronchial lungs. Birds lay a shelled egg, and they have no urinary system and no bladder, again, as a weight reduction mechanism. Finally, females have only one set of reproductive organs, one ovary on one side of their body, again, to help reduce weight. If we look at some of these features of birds, here we can see a cutaway section of a large bird humerus where you can see the hollow nature. This hollow bone is very lightweight, but these little struts here provide for a very, very strong and sturdy bone. This is a keeled sternum from a goose, and you can see the large keel here representing the increased amount of surface area for the pectoral muscles to attach. Compare this to our own sternum, which is very, very flat. Here we can see the skulls of 4 different kinds of birds, and I want to pay particular attention to their beak. This red-tailed hawk skull has a beak that's adapted for eating meat, whether it's pulling meat off of a bone or eating lizards, snakes, etc. The northern cardinal beak is adapted to crack open seeds like a pair of pliers. The hummingbird has a very long tubular beak for consuming nectar, and the beak or bill of this gadwall, a type of duck, is adapted for feeding in marshy wetlands, filtering invertebrates and seeds from the water. Mammals are characterized by an epidermal covering of hair. The name mammal comes from the mammary glands found in mammals that help to produce milk to nourish their young. Mammals have a unique type of teeth that is known as heterodont dentition, where the teeth from the anterior and posterior portions of the mouths are shaped differently. And we'll see in a moment incisors, canines, premolars, and molars doing different things. Mammals have a 4-chambered heart. They have enucleate red blood cells without a nucleus. They have a muscular diaphragm to ventilate their lungs, and most mammals produce live birth. Mammals have a set of 3 bones, the incus, malleus, and stapes, known as the ossicles, which are the bones of our inner ear for hearing. There are 3 groups of mammals: the monotremes, like a duck-billed platypus or an echidna; marsupials, such as kangaroos and the North American opossum; and then placental mammals, which include this bat below, dogs, cows, and humans, and most of the other mammals that you are familiar with. If we look at this skull of a coyote, we can see the heterodont dentition of mammals is exemplified, and we see the incisors at the front of the mouth, the canines, the premolars, followed by the molars. And notice how each different group of teeth is shaped a little bit differently to do different things.